going to be fun. We have 3 guests at the table, and I would like to start with you, Anneke. And well, you've been at many organizations in different roles. You've been at TomTom, Coolblue, Jumbo, and Wehkamp, of course. And we know that you are writing a book currently. Can you tell us something about what your book is about?
Yeah, I can. It's not finished yet. I'm still working on it, but my plan is to make a book about. I've worked at some companies and also in very exciting times. So I really, was very lucky that I could be there at those times. And what I noticed is that when I was working there, normally head of the IT department, all kind of different function names for that, but and I noticed that every time I saw a sequence in what happened in the department, and hopefully I influenced that a little bit. Because I had all those experiences, I thought, maybe I'm not the only one that's interested in it. Let's see if I can write it down, and then everyone can read it. All the things that I did good, all the things that I did wrong, and then maybe you don't have to make the same mistakes as I did. So that's what the book is about. It's really about how can you best guide a department through some heavy times. Do you want me to go into it a little bit deeper? Or?
Yeah, because you said you recognized a cycle in those organizations. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think so. I try to divide different phases, and I always say, it's a department or tech area is not a static thing. It's something that grows, right? It has its own will, so to say, as a group of people, and you try to moderate that a little bit. And the cycle, I believe, is that when you start with a company, you're there, and very often people are very busy with the daily work, with the operation, with making sure everything is stable. IT systems run is always a nice habit of them. They don't always do, like ING being completely down yesterday for a whole day. But that's the first thing you want to have under control. Make sure that people are not the whole time busy with that. Once that's sort of under control, you think about the strategy of the company and how the tech department can support that. And sometimes you have to change something in the structure of your organization. The framework of your organization isn't fitting the company anymore. So that's the thing that you can work on then, because you're not daily busy with the operation. You can go there. And then when you've changed the organization, then a very, very important phase starts. It's the phase of culture. Because you have new people in new roles, sometimes new people getting in, and everyone is like, okay, great, we're here, but now how are we going to do this? How are we going to make that innovate? How we're going to innovate? So then you have to work with culture, and this is also, the book is called The Cherry Model, and the reason for that is that I like to compare teams with cherries, whether they like it or not. But that is because if you have a cherry has a hard bit and a very soft outer layer, and the hard bit is very important because it's where the tree grows from, right? And it stands for the hard skills, and that's good. You need you need to have a proper team, quality in your team, but that's not the only thing, and that's why the very big, much bigger outer layer, soft outer layer, the soft skills are there, because you need to work together. You need to listen to each other. There are all kind of things that you need to do to make sure that you're actually a good cherry, that you're actually fruitful, I think is the English word. So once you've done that, you have your operation under control, you have your organization is set for the goal, and the culture is something that people like to work in, and it's also innovative, then you can change. And that's actually the 4th stage. You can really make big changes in your organization, like building an online environment for Jumbo, or making sure that the company can grow.
Culture. Where do you start? Like, do you start eating the cherry from the outside in, or is it like inside out, or?
Well, I sometimes have debates with people and they say, Anneke, shouldn't you, before hiring, think of your culture and then make sure that you hire people that are matching your culture, which is a sort of a good argument, but I don't like that, because then I'm the one saying this is the culture and this is how it's going to be. But I believe you need to sit together and really make the culture, define the culture together. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether that's outside in or inside out. I don't know how to answer that question. But what I just do practically is you sit together and you say, okay, you know, what's it really about? What are we going to do? And it can be different for any company. Yeah.
I can imagine. So you called the model the cherry model. The talk show is about leadership in tech. What do leaders have to do to accommodate the growing of the cherries or the teams? What is their role in that?
What I believe is that you call often managers in a company, but I like to call them leaders. And the leadership of it is that if you look at cherries, and this is where the metaphor really works, because cherries, they hang on a tree, right? And I always think that the management or the leadership of a company is the stem and the branches. It's also sort of a hark. What's a hark in English? Fork, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, we can go for fork.
You know, if you have a hierarchical structure in a company, and but then you switch this upside down, it looks a little bit like a tree. That's what I try to say.
And that's how they call it, a tree.
They call it a tree.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's no. Okay, so it's a tree. And I think really it's important, if you are a leader of a company and you want your team to innovate, you want them to be autonomous, all those things you want in agile development. You need to behave like the stem and the branches. You need to support your team to be able to grow, basically. And then what I also really like is that then you have all the roots in the ground, which stands for culture, right? It sucks all the water and the nitrogens from the ground and make sure that we get very nice big fruit, sappige.
It's currently really on
cherries,
vogue, right? So it's really popular to talk leadership all the time. When some people would say management, is there, in your opinion, like a distinction between the two? Is there something that is mostly management, and is that even a valid distinction anymore? Or do you think, well, actually, it's basically leadership all the way?
You need to ask linguist people about the real difference. But what I do believe is that if you are either managing or leading a team, it's not only about making sure the process is right. It's also about making sure that people learn, that they like their job, as in they have the feeling that what they do at the office is something worth doing. So that's what for me is a little bit a difference between management and leadership, but I don't care how you call it. Basically, I always use those words. Through each other. I don't really make difference there. Yeah,
because I think in your career you have been called a VP, a manager, a head of, all kinds of names, not names, distinctions.
Yeah, function titles.
Yeah. So I can imagine there's no real important difference between manager or leader.
Yeah, I think also it's a little bit the time we're in, right? So I can't, if I would have said, like, I started as a manager of a department, I guess 15, 20 years ago. And well, actually 20 years ago, I just don't want to admit that. And it would be, if I would then talk about myself as a leader in that time, it would be really weird. They were like, oh, are you? It would be very, very...
too mushy.
Yeah, too much. And now if you say it, I'm the lead of this team, it's kind of a okay thing to say. So I think it's also just time has changed and people talk differently about it.
Yeah, actually the opposite has almost become true, right? So when you say management, people think, no.
Exactly,
management is like evil. And that was what I tried to eke out. And management, of course, well, at least in my opinion, it's not always evil. Where would you say that, like, management in sense of, I won't say controlling people, but structuring an organization and making sure it is administered properly, right? So exactly the thing that some people would not jump out of bed for racing to get to work. A lot of people still do feel that that's necessary. What's your opinion on that?
I think it depends a lot on what is happening in your department. So, if you're in charge of that's actually a good word. In charge, it's very independent. If you're in charge of a department, when everything falls apart, I probably manage the department. I just decide what we're going to do because simply we don't have time to think. Let's just not have a meeting on what to do. Let's just go do stuff. So then you're probably, well, at least directing people in a certain, you're telling people, you're not really telling people what to do, but you take decisions very quickly, which is not my natural style. Normally I would, if possible, sit together and have all opinions, and then at a certain moment take a decision, if preferably together. So that's the thing, right? If you have time and you can, I would really do it in a more, because more minds then think about one problem, and it's just a better decision that you take after that. But yeah, if there's no time, then you're the boss of a department, so you just make sure things happen. I'm probably managing then.
But isn't that subjective? How much time there is? Because it can also be an excuse for people saying there's no time, so I should have told them where to go. But if we're never making time, then we can never tap into the knowledge of all those people.
Sure.
So I totally agree with you that it's that's very situational based on what you as a leader or manager should do. But I think there is a scary thing in using time as one of the variables.
Yeah, I agree. I think, one of the things you should decide on as a leader is what gets priority when. I think that's the real decision you take.
Absolutely.
And then you decide to, for example, just if I go to my model where you take steps, when in the beginning, when everything is still operationally not under control, I don't think about culture. I don't take the time to think about culture. I also make sure that if people start thinking about that, I say, well, maybe it's not the time now. Let's first get this done, and then so you do decide on priorities, I think. And I think you're a good leader if you know what has priority when.
And when does culture come into play?
Well, I believe when you're not running around because of the operation, when you know the structure of your organization, so you know the people you're gonna do it with, then is the time. And what also is that the time between that is very short. So the moment you feel your organization is forming, and I can't really say how you feel that, to be honest, but I kind of feel, and then you have to be, I know you have to be really quick, because otherwise you're too late, and then if people know something needs to happen, but have no clue where to start, and that's a very bad thing to happen in your team. You don't want that.
And how would you describe the feeling?
I think that's hard. Well, also you get mails from people. So it's. I think the feeling is you walk around, you drink coffee with people, all those things, and they talk about what's happening, and some things go into the group from things normal stuff that always happens in the department, and they have some remarks. I'm like, no, we should do something about it. And then if this adds up to a certain level, it's time. But I still find it really hard to describe that.
Yeah.
That's why I write a book, because I really try to put it down on paper, but it's really hard.
In my perspective, I think sometimes what bases on me is the team has a basic characteristic, and that is something I expect in all the teams. For example, having the higher quality and pushing those things and being agile as well as delivering quality code. That is where my focus will be. And if I see that is going in a decreasing trend or something like that, if that is first moment for me, okay, there is something going wrong, I have to take an action on top of it. So then I'll nudge more, probe more about the team, hey, what's happening there? What else? Where is the difficulty? How can I help? As a leader, you can give the ability, give them the ownership, but nudge them at some places or probe them at some places, get the feedback from them, and then you can articulate the culture of the team based on how it goes. But every individual that joins your team can shape the culture of the team, so that is very dynamic. But as a leader, you can put the guardrails in picture so that you can say okay, this is how I want the team to look like, and then you can go towards that direction. Again, you have to be flexible there, but the team culture is always dynamic for me, so it kind of changes.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just thinking of something. You can also look at data. So there are also things. If you as a manager or leader, you normally get your reports and you look at the trends of KPIs basically, and if you've seen a lot of those reports, at a certain moment you can see from the figures like, now we need to go to the next phase.
Yeah, and looking at data currently is all the rage, right? With the ChatGPT and whatnot, of like automated systems to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe more.
I'm
on
talking
that
about
later.
the time there was no ChatGPT. Yet, sorry.
And well, talking about time, by the way, so the time tends to progress, and as it does, you gain more understanding. What would you say is your biggest learning as a leader? So something that never fails to make things better for people you talk to about leadership.
I think I have some, a few things that always are sort of always true for any department. And these are kind of cultural values, so to say, that, well, they normally come out of all the discussions. And one of them is things you want to be, if you want to innovate, you want to be able to fail. You want to have like they call it like a blameless culture. You have all kind of nice fancy words for it. But it basically comes to, okay, if something goes wrong, then you really need to think how to react to that. Because normally you're the one getting the calls, or your managers get the calls like, hey, think something goes wrong. And then you can say, yeah, but that was this and this person that did this and this wrong, and therefore, I mean, you can make such a story, which I think is not exactly the answer that you should give. You should say, okay, yes, things go wrong in an IT department, we will evaluate, but you're not going to point at someone doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. So next up is Sendil, but first we're going to have to look at just a little teaser for something else.
Welcome to the Lead Community Newsflash. I'm your host, Jethro Sloan. Being a leader is a lot like being the conductor of an orchestra. Instead of musicians, you have programmers. Instead of beautiful music, you have code. And instead of a conductor, you have a leader who has a company hoodie and a caffeine addiction. Speaking of leaders, I hear a lot of criticism aimed at Elon Musk, the man who brought you electric cars, a new space program, and flamethrowers. But then he bought Twitter. We all love a good comeback story. But really, Elon, where do you go from here? I hear a lot of comparisons between Twitter and the Titanic. But the iceberg didn't purchase the Titanic before it sank it. In our next story, Google has again been accused of abusing online advertisement technology. And in other news, water is wet. ChatGPT is the latest internet buzz. I mean, who doesn't want to ask a computer to do the job that they're paid for? So I decided to ask it to explain to me what quantum mechanics was as if I was a 5-year-old. I was immediately impressed that I got an answer that was not only accurate, but well written and easily understandable. Terminator was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. I particularly liked the machines. And I really want to go on record here and say that I really, really like the machines. Please remember me when you take over. But in all seriousness, panel, do you think that we're on the verge of an AI revolution?
So, Sendil, are we on the verge of an AI revolution?
I think yes. I firmly believe in it, but it's not like it's going to take over at some place, like not completely take over, but human being will play a major role in it. But I do see like it interferes in day-to-day life. For example, coding, for example, generative arts and all those things. We are already seeing the benefits of it, and it will come to us more and more. That's what I believe.
So, Ellis, what could possibly go wrong?
I was actually thinking of the benefits of it.
What could possibly go right then?
I really like this story that a woman who had a very special form of cancer, they put all the data of that particular type of cancer in an AI robot, and they found it within a couple of minutes. And, you know, what if we wouldn't have that AI? we would probably never have found out what she had. And now they could treat her, and she got better. I mean, that's amazing, right? So I don't think it's going to replace doctors. It's going to add to doctors. That's how I feel about AI.
Yeah,
So
really
it's an
good.
addition,
Yes.
not a replacement.
Well, it might replace some things, but then we need to renew. We need to think about the things where we can add value and what robots or AI can take over. And I think exactly that is what we need to do, innovate.
Yeah. And Anneke, we had a nice conversation earlier about AI. You've been at TomTom.
True. Yeah. We were talking about that in 2007. I worked at TomTom. We made the software on the embedded system, so the little thing that you put on the glass of your car. So the talk about AI, and so this question about when is it going to happen, I think we already ask ourselves for 20 years or so, and I believe that AI is there already for a very long time. I think by now we do have really fast computers that can, or servers, etc., hardware that can actually make sure that the calculations go very fast, so it feels much more usable. I agree with Alice. There are good things and bad things about it, and we'll learn to live with it.
My personal take on the subject is it'll become AI-assisted everything. So it will not take over, but it will be like the thing that people use, like they currently use computers to craft text that we would previously written by hand and stuff, and then typewriters, and then it became like text editors, and now it's fully fledged suites. And over time, the same thing will happen with AI. As a trainer, I'm a bit freaked out by the fact that if you're doing a certification exam, ChatGPT actually gives really good answers.
But actually, that is great, because you could wonder: is taking an exam the best way to see if somebody has the skill? And now with ChatGPT, we need to reconsider how we are going to take exams, how we're going to teach scholars to take the theory. So I'm looking forward to the discussions that are happening right now. Okay, so if we should not have them write an essay, perhaps we should do an oral exam. Yes, so innovate, start doing new things. I think that's a great thing.
And talking about discussions I'm looking forward to, Sendil, you are engineering leader at Uber. You're a speaker. You're also an author, so more on that in a few seconds. And you're a polyglot full-stack developer. Now, I used to be more of a nerd than I'm now, but I'm pretty much also a polyglot full-stack developer. So what kind of languages do you code?
Yeah, I mean, professionally, if you ask me, I'm a big JVM developer, and then JavaScript is my favorite language. Some people might kill me for that, but it's okay.
You're safe here.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. And I do love functional programming a lot, and first time I started working in Haskell, I was like, wow, this is something you have to think a lot about it, but you just write a couple of lines and everything happens for you. So that's my feedback. I very actively learn programming languages, and last year I did around 3 or 4 programming languages.
Yeah, so 3 or 4 programming, and while also being engineering leader.
Yes. But it's also once you become an engineering manager, the amount of code that you're going to write that goes out professionally is going to be much lesser. But here are more open source stuff, and then doing your hobby stuff and stuff like that.
And talk about writing. If I'm not mistaken, you've written more than one book.
Yeah, I've written 2 books. One on full stack development, and then the second book is on WebAssembly and Rust, how to use them and build applications together. Yeah.
Good. So let's shift a little bit to leadership questions, and then focus on large-scale migrations, because that's the topic at hand. What's the meaning of large-scale migration? What do I need to think of?
Yeah, you can think of it in multiple different dimensions. If you're looking at the infra angle, it's like migrating that old Solaris OS servers that you still have into newer Linux OS or something like that. And in the technology perspective, like changing your languages from X to Y, and how do you go about it? And then there are a lot of deprecated systems. I think any company you take, people will be afraid of touching that one part of the code or that one part of the service, which is very deprecated. And migrating that to newer languages, or migrating that into more efficient system. That's what I mean by large-scale migration, where you have to change the engine when the plane is running, those kind of things, where the impact is much higher, but you have to deliver it irrespective of however it happens. And that's like, there's a large thing that's at stake, and also like, it requires a lot of work for you to complete it. That's what I mean by a large-scale migration.
So, and just with writing a book, you have this like famous white page syndrome, right? When as an author, you're looking at the screen and you think, oh, big book, lots of work. With large-scale migrations, I'm assuming that's lots of work too. How do you get over that hump of like just being afraid of the amount of work that you're taking on? What's the first step?
I mean, like for me, everything, even for the book and also for this one, it's the planning comes first. And by plan, it's like I put down my thoughts in a document and like just put an abstract, put just one liner. It can be just headings, subheadings, and stuff like that. And then I'd really think about it, like whether it makes sense, whether the progress that we are going to make, can we do it like in a multiple phases or milestones? It's basically like planning, and then subdividing your work into multiple milestones, and then go after it. One of the major things that I also look in, especially in terms of migration, is whether you have systems that can detect the failures earlier. If you don't have that detection earlier, then that is where like I would say like, okay, let's not go over migration, let's go and fix that particular thing. Because we want to have this process more dynamic, and things should happen in a more progressive way. So first, measure everything that you have, ensure that you have proper observability and analytics attached to the system. And that would be my first question. And if that is not there, then go and build it. If that is there, then I go about planning and then like documenting everything, making sure like all the stakeholders are understanding about it. So communication, that plays a major role. But it's for communication and to the stakeholders for in an organization, it's nothing more than an Excel or a Jira board or something like that. That is more than enough to show the progress. But at the end of the day, like that's how I look. First, I break down the problems and then try to solve it step by step.
You talked about a large variety of migrations that you could have, right, on the code or on the applications. But it feels like that you figured out a generic approach for all these migrations. And that's what you just explained. But what if you have created that breakdown and you have identified milestones? What if the plan or the execution of the plan does not work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, the more and more you go to the atomic level of the problem, the more and more diverse it gets based on the problem that you've taken. And whenever something happens, it's basically like you have to have the robust fallback or rollback plans that is there. And that would definitely help you out, like to come out of it. Like you always have to think about like, what if this thing gets failed? How am I going to come out of it? How is the service that is currently running goes ahead about its business? And like always ensure that you have that robust rollback plan for every atomic step that you have, and then think more about it. Like in that rollback itself, you can classify them as reversible and irreversible. If you hit up in any irreversible block, then you have to be very careful and then like think about like, okay, if I move away from the step, there is no way for me to go back to the old state. I always have to go front. So if you have taken that step, then it will be very critical for you like to go slow, but also make sure like you are capturing everything on the process. That would definitely help.
And as you do that, in what way do you involve leaders?
Yeah, I mean like that's a good question. And basically how I see it is like you cannot take all the decision by yourself. The more and more you go in the leadership chain, the more and more distant it gets from you for your day-to-day activity in coding. I'm not saying like you cannot code, but the amount of code that you're going to write is going to be lesser, which means you do not know the ground reality and what the people are struggling with. So there, we have to rely on the managers or the leaders in the team to understand what sort of problems they have and how they are going to rectify it. And the way I see it is like for the migration and also about choice of technology and everything, I would really love those things come from bottom up rather than top down. Like you should not suggest this is a technology that you should use, but it's more like getting input from the team and understanding like what is their problem and why they are going to a solution. As a leader, you have specific skills, and that's how I see it, where you can probe and ask them the questions, ask them why they are thinking, whether that thinking aligns with the company's future or the values of the company that we have or the services that we're going to deliver. Once you're convinced about the team that they're ready and they have clearly documented and clearly have an idea, they also have a rollback plan. As a leader, for you, it's like to carry that forward and get all the necessary approvals that is needed and be a mask or be a shield for the team and let them operate and let them deliver those things. That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned some specific skills that you need as a leader. I heard you say asking questions and convince. What are other skills that you would need as a leader in your or in large-scale migrations or in your organization?
I mean, like, one of the things that I would strongly suggest, irrespective of the scenarios, like empathy, that is what is needed for a leader. And why I say it, especially in the large-scale migration scenario, is like, if a team decides, hey, I want to migrate from X to Y language, let's take that example. And then if your team decides that, and you are not aware of the Y language, then you do not understand the ground reality of like what is going to happen and where the team will struggle. So as a leader, you have to empathize with the team, understand like what is the problem that they have and why do they migrate to Y. You either, like there are two ways to do it. Like you either go and understand how the Y works and then get yourself knowledgeable on it and then move forward from there. Or you can go back and see like, if they go to Y, what are the problems that they have? So you can use your expertise over there, you can use the subject matter experts over there, understand the problem that you're foreseeing. So it's always like good to have that empathy with your team, so you understand the problems that they're facing and why they are struggling with this, and then you can proactively give them solutions. I think like irrespective of scenario, I definitely feel empathy is one of the major ingredients for a leader.
Great, thank you for that. And do you think you also need the technical knowledge as a leader to guide your team or to help your team or to support your team?
It is debatable. For me, I really feel I need to have it because I have that urge.
You have it, right?
Yeah. I have the urge to understand like why my team is taking that technical decision. But I do feel like as you grow higher and higher in the leadership chain, the more you are looking into design and architecture decisions a team makes and a coding structure the team makes, and you're going to do the code reviews and stuff like that, it kind of complicates a lot of things in your team. So you have to stay at one level higher where you can do meta code reviews where you don't leave any comments but see how the pattern is evolving. And also in design and architecture, go and do not give feedback or do not go line by line, but see how generally they are trending towards. So you need to have the concepts, you need to understand it, and then you have to deliver on top of it.
Yeah.
Now, before we make time for a special message, I have one last question I want to ask you, which is what are you most proud of? What has been your biggest challenge? What are you most proud of?
That's a good question. I do take things very seriously, and every code that I write and everything that I write, I take it very proud. But once I become a leader, I see like more and more when I take my people for promotion, and then like we have a promo committee, so going that promo committee and then fighting for those candidates and then like getting promotion for them, I feel fulfillment and I really feel proud of it. So that is one area I'm like, that motivates me in the morning to go to office. So I'm really, really passionate on that.
Thank you so much. Now let's look at a promotion.
Ja, ik zit hier.
Are the first generation that know we're destroying the world,
Yes.
and could be the last that can do anything about it. This is a choice.
The food we eat, the things we buy, the way we live. We can win the biggest battles in the smallest moments. Are you for the world or against it? It's time to decide.
Join the fight for your world with WWF.
So, Anneke, what we just saw, World Wildlife Fund message, you don't have to tap into what we just saw just now because it might be a bit of a heavy subject, but what makes you enthusiastic about working with that organization? Because that's one of the things you do, right?
Yeah, it's true. I'm in the advisory board of the WWF, and I really like. Well, like is not maybe a good word, but I feel it's a useful thing to do, and it's good that I are able to do it and help there, because, well, it's a heavy message, but it's not untrue. So I think what we do is so that I'm not like daily involved in what's going on in WWF, right? It's an international organization with in every, well, a lot of countries in the world trying to protect as much as possible the wildlife and the ecosystems and the whole planet, basically. And I think, it's what we try to do is in the Netherlands, you have, of course, the donor stuff you do to make sure that there is some money to make to protect animals everywhere in the world. But there are also projects in the Netherlands, like the Waddenzee, which is the north of the Netherlands, and all kind of places, the woods, etc. And we support the organization that does that. I think that's the best summary of what we do.
Thank you. Now, talk about important messages. Jethro has a question for us.
Hey panel, we received a question from the audience. They want to know what the influence of artificial intelligence has on company and engineering culture.
Oh, just to ease into it, talk about heavy questions, Alice.
Thank you.
Alice.
I'm still processing the question. Can I have
AI
some
to
artificial
answer this.
intelligence help in here? I actually think it's going to increase the innovative culture, so that possibly is going to positively influence the engineering culture. That's what I would assume, because it's going to give so much more computing power to try stuff, experiment. So I think it's going to have a positive effect on engineering culture if you really embrace it.
Now, we just happen to have an engineering manager here at the table, so what's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, like, it will give that platform for you to enhance yourself, and that is one thing. And it also ensures, like, the traditional values that we have in a company and also the culture that we're thinking about in a company, that might change a little bit, because AIs kind of go and like level this playing field. So it's not going to be doing that efficient coding or doing that efficient part of it, because that is part like AI would take into effect. It's like tuning that into more performance, or tuning that at that level of skills where like people will be pushed to it, and that is the change that I do foresee in the teams coming, because it's going to level the playing field, and it's going to change the traditional characteristics that we have in the team into something different.
Nice.
And for societal good, anything
For
to add?
societal good. Oh, I was preparing for an engineering question. I think AI will have more effect than we think now, and it will, like big technological changes, kind of. We know when the internet started, we expected it to have a big impact immediately, and it didn't come. And then, later it actually has this big impact, but it came just a little bit later. I think AI will work the same. That over time, it will have a huge impact, bad and good, both, I guess, like internet, same. And also on societal things. But yeah, there's so many examples you can think of where it would help, and also where it's scary, because those computers use energy a lot, which is definitely not so healthy.
Yeah.
Did we manage to answer the question, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think from multiple aspects you guys nailed it.
Awesome. Well, talking about nailing it, at the table currently, Ellis de Haan, Chief Operating Officer of Xebia. Welcome.
Thank you.
I've been told by someone that at some point in your life you also worked at ABN AMRO.
I did. It needs to be quicker. ABN AMRO.
Okay, great. So there are lots of theories in leadership, and all kinds of leadership has been given names. Could you share some thoughts on how to be a good one, or a great one even, in tech?
Wow. So this whole discussion about leadership or management is actually making me a little bit rebellious, because I think it's suddenly being a manager became a dirty word. Or got a negative connotation. Yeah. And it's the same what I think are very important skills for a good leader and manager, steering behavior. So I think that there's this general idea that in an agile environment, the leadership should have a hands-off approach on management teams or on managing teams. But you can only have self-steering teams if they know where to steer to. It's the same with soccer. You know, if there's no referee, if there's no line, it's not a great fun to watch. So I think we need very clear guidelines, very clear ideas on where to go, so that teams can steer themselves. So I think that steering behavior is an incredible effective behavior of a leader, and the same as supportive and sounding behavior. However, I have done research on the topic within my previous employer when they were transforming to Agile. And what I really found is that we're constantly looking for leaders and managers when we're already Agile. But what about getting there? And actually that requires some general change management behavior. And I am wondering, could that be the same person? Is the person that is leading the teams in an Agile setting the same as people leading towards an Agile environment? And I still don't have an answer to that.
And is that a question about skills, or is it about the style that manager or leader has?
I think it's both. And I definitely feel for the fact that you need to have empathy. It's about sensing how mature a team is. And there was this really nice example of a new Scrum Master, and he asked his manager on what should I do, and this manager, probably educated in Agile, said you need to ask questions. So if you get a question on what do I do, you tell the guy, what do you think? And this really didn't help at all. So sometimes it's okay to tell people where to go and where to find the answer and to be more directive. Well, in other moments, and it's also indeed something that you need to sense, people are becoming more mature and mature, and then, you know, they're not going to like, what do you think I should do? But it's like, no, this is what I'm going to do, back off. And so it's about sensing the maturity of a person, of a team, and how much ownership they can have. But also don't be afraid to steer and give guidelines when it's needed.
You know what really helps is that if you're managing IT people, it's maybe only my teams, but they always have an opinion. So if you steer wrongly, they'll tell you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel
At least that's my experience.
Sorry, I'm not taking anything out of it. But as a manager, I do feel like you need to have a vision for the team, and if you're not having a vision, then being directive and also like making sure you're taking the charge and steering the ship towards that vision and setting the guardrails and boundaries and everything is very essential for a manager. So you have to wear multiple hats, and that directly depends on the vision that you have. Like if your team is not having that vision, then it's your duty to set that vision. If your team has it, then it's your duty to guard that vision. And that's where like you have to like understand the needs of the team and then put that forward and move it.
But to tap into that, you know, to understand the needs of the team, we need to actually visit the teams. We need to spend time with people. And lots of the things that you still see is this meeting culture of management being in meetings all the time, back to back. But if we don't want teams to reinvent the wheel, or if we want them to collaborate, I think that is one of the major tasks of a manager, is to make sure that when something happens in team A, that team H knows as well, and you are the ones to bring them together. And that means that we need to spend time.
Can I ask you something? Because I can imagine that more leaders or managers have that problem. I have a very loaded agenda. Do you have any tips on how to decrease the amount of meetings, sessions, and things that they...
I can tell from my personal experience. So when I was looking into the data for my research, I've done a lot of interviews. And at a certain moment, I was looking into all the quotes. And there was this moment that I realized I'm doing it all wrong. It was a horrible Christmas. So, and I was looking to my data and to my conclusions, and I thought, okay, I'm going to empty my calendar, and I'm first going to put in the demos of the teams that I'm responsible for. And then next to that, I'll look into time on the floor, so that I can take away impediments, so that I know how the teams are doing, and then I have this one management team somewhere meeting every 1 or 2 weeks. And then I blocked times in between. This is processing time. And so then when somebody came to me like, I want to meet, I said, okay, can it be in some one of these meetings that I already have in my calendar? So is it something that we can discuss in the demo, or is it something that we can do in that management team, or can you come over by my desk when I'm on the floor? And they're like, yes, perfect, we don't need a meeting. So we're meeting too much.
You mentioned research, so that made me think. Did you also write a book, just like our other guests, or was it something else?
No. I'm a big failure here. I was thinking of writing an article. I started twice. I had a lot of meetings about it with my research teacher. I like talking more than writing, so I think I should do more of this.
More talking, yeah. Great.
So, leadership, as we also just touched on, is situational. It depends what the team, the situation that they're in, and also where you want them to go. How does the context of the environment impact your style of leadership?
Yeah, it's all based on context. So if you're in a crisis, then that is being more directive. But if you're in a situation where, so I was actually wondering about this. If you're in a crisis, and you should indeed not per se talk about culture or biggest change, but sometimes you need a change to get to a stable situation. So that's actually a little bit of a chicken and an egg situation.
The chicken and egg problem actually has a solution. So what would be the solution to this particular chicken and egg situation?
What do you think? That's what I should do, right? In an agile situation.
You're a good leader. You just ask questions.
Yeah, push back. Well, actually, that's not supposed to happen in a talk show, so I'm just going to divert to somebody else.
That's
so
fine.
What do you think?
What I think? Well, I think what I do. I don't think too much. No, I do. But so what I notice is that I very often do the opposite of what I naturally would do. So if the team is in a crisis and you are in the beginning directive, at a certain moment things go. They go wrong or right, that doesn't matter, but they go. And then as a leader you do have some time to think. And very often if there's a lot of energy, I'm the one kind of calming down. My natural reaction would be, oh, things go wrong, let's start running. But I need to tell myself, no, we need to have calmness in the room now. And so that's a situation where it's the other way around. Then, if my team is delivering lots of releases and everything's, things are really delivered, very often they are very proud. They're a little bit too proud of themselves, and then I'm asking some questions. So I do the opposite thing. Because of course I like to praise them, and all, which I do. But I also say, yeah, but did we think about it? And that didn't go really well, right? So I'm trying. So very often by doing the opposite of what you naturally would do, this also gets you out of crisis. Well, there are a few things you can do to get out of a crisis, but one of them is just stay calm, keep thinking. As a leader or as everyone in the team, because normally then all of us start doing that. That really helps.
So Sendil, any experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, like from my perspective, whenever the crisis happens, I do two things. One is like exactly the same thing, the balancing act, and the next thing is like going to the team with the problem and asking them a suggestion or a solution towards there, and then do a brainstorming as a bottoms-up activity. That clearly clears out like what is needed. But as a manager, you definitely have some agenda, or you definitely have something for the company, the value of the company, and driving towards there. So it's always a mixture of those two things and then delivering values together.
I love a good crisis. I sometimes need to think by myself, don't smile too much. We're in a crisis, but I am in a good mood.
And why is it that in a crisis you become happy?
Because when the fire is really on, people start really working together. If it's the heating up the room. It's a moment that you see the best out of people and the worst. I like escape rooms as well. It's the perfect simulation. So it's really where you see how people can complement each other to get to a certain solution. I love that. Yeah.
Now, if there were one pro tip that you could give your peers in the C-suite, what would it be?
Don't think that transforming to agile means that you don't have to lead anymore. And leading is not only facilitating leadership, it's situational. That means that sometimes you need to guide, have a clear vision, not being afraid to tell where to go. And another situation where you sense or empathize indeed with teams, where you see maturity is growing, then you can go more into a supportive or hands-off approach. But don't please fire all the good middle managers who are good at change at the start of an agile transformation.
And how's that for engineering leaders?
Sorry, what was the question?
Well, what is the pro tip that that you would have for your peers?
Yeah, one thing for me is I strongly believe on empathy. I think that is one area where I do see few of my peers or in other companies and things like that. When I talk to them, I feel like they don't have that empathy towards the team, and I think that's one thing I would definitely love to have. The second part is so I come from an environment where I don't completely follow agile and things like that. So what works for the team, that is best for the team. And if they are comfortable in delivering and your team is seeing the value out of it, just go with it. Don't blindly follow some framework. I don't want that there. That's it.
That tends to be great advice, to not blindly follow frameworks.
Wow.
Thank you.
And you?
Well, many things, but I connect a little bit with Evelien, the way she started. We make sometimes these leadership topics are really heavy and people have their calendars completely filled with meetings and all those things. Have a little bit fun as well, right? I mean, we're trying to get better in the world. Let's see if we can keep it sometimes a little bit light, because we need to keep going and fix quite some stuff in the world.
Good.
Yeah, so let's keep it fun.
Did we have fun?
I did. Did you?
Did I have fun, Alice?
You look like.
Okay. So thank you very much for being here. We really do appreciate it. Is there any last message that you would like to share with the audience?
No?
No.
Good.
Great.
In that case, we're done.
There we're done.
Thank you.
Okay.